Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to jump on the show and talk pricing. First of all, how are you?
I'm doing fabulous. I'm here in sunny Reno today.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm in Miami, Florida, and it's sort of sunny. I was telling my cousin yesterday that it's like if the last couple of days has felt like we've been in living in Seattle, so it's been a little rainy and gloomy. But thanks again for taking the time. Why don't you take a quick second to just kind of introduce yourself? Tell folks a little bit about how'd you get into becoming like the pricing expert in our space.
So how did I get into pricing is a fascinating story. I remember being a kid and seeing prices that ended in 9 when I would go to the grocery store with my mom, right? So 69, 99. And I always wondered, why do companies do that? Do they think we're stupid? And we all know that 99 is really a dollar. And so several years later, I was at a doctoral program in UC Berkeley, and I had a chance to play with scanner panel data. This is the data that grocery stores collect when we use our loyalty cards. And I was able to prove that 9 cents really works as a price ending. And I was also able to test why. And it turns out the reason why is that we're lazy subtractors.
Mm.
Now, I became addicted to understanding how people use prices to make decisions and how companies make decisions based on how people use prices to make decisions.
Amazing. I think a lot about pricing as a startup founder, and I gotta say, people have, at least in my experience, have really underestimated the importance of pricing and really how hard it is to nail. I was telling you kind of when we were prepping, beforehand, that at every startup that I've been at, we've changed it multiple times. In fact, the last one I remember, we changed it, and I'm trying to remember, at least 4 to 6 times in 1 year. If you're a founder out there trying to kind of just get started, what are some of those kind of early processes or tips that you would give those founders around just kind of starting a baseline?
Yeah. So first off, let me say that I am thrilled that you changed your pricing 4 to 6 times in a year. That does not bother me at all. Here's the two things I think that are most important if you're going to start a brand new company and you want to do pricing. Number one, your pricing's not going to be right, so don't worry about it. Right? Do something and see what happens. And my guess is that you probably want to start lower than you think you want to start. You're not trying to capture all the marketplace or all the value that you deliver because you want to get something in the market. You want to start getting feedback from customers. You want to see what's actually happening. And over time, you'll work that price up to where it really belongs. And so in the beginning, you're not trying to pay your bills with the price. You're really trying to prove that this business works.
Mm.
But the second thing I would tell you is don't give it away for free, right? If you've got a product with LinkedIn, with network effects like LinkedIn, and you're really trying to build a network, then maybe you give it away for free. And you have to have a lot of VC backing for that. But in truth, if you charge for something, now you have to convince somebody it's worth it. And so do you really have a product that people would pay you for? It doesn't matter how many users we get. It matters that people would pay us to use our product.
Mhm.
So charge something, start to learn how buyers perceive the value of our product, how much value they perceive, and then it's fine to go tweak the price, tweak the pricing model. In fact, if I could give any advice, it'd be to get the pricing model right before you worry about anything like getting the price right.
And would the pricing, an example of a pricing model being, let's say, performance based or usage based versus like a per seat, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I guess the basic one is, are we going to do a subscription or transaction based model? If we're going to do subscription and it's cloud based, we now have hundreds of different pricing metrics we could choose from to charge for. So choosing the right pricing metrics based on how do our customers perceive the value of our products? How will it help them understand what they're paying for? Those decisions are way more important than what's the price point I'm going to use.
And is there any sort of approach that a founder should take when trying to determine what that first price would be? You mentioned a second ago, like maybe starting off a little lower than maybe what you'll eventually become. any sort of like, sort of advice around getting that? Because I think like sometimes what founders will do is they'll look at like, models out there that exist in the world, or maybe competitors or indirect competitors, and say, "Oh, that looks interesting. They seem to be doing okay. Let me, try that." But I've heard that that's really not a great, sort of proxy.
I think that's an okay proxy to get into the marketplace. So the question is, when you come out with your new product, what is it that you're trying to do that's different? Because you have to be doing something different. And is your product going to be different? Is your pricing model going to be different? Is the way you do business different? You have to be doing something different. And I would say most companies come out with a different product and they say, hey, we're trying to solve this unique problem that's different than our competitors in the following way. And so it doesn't hurt to say, look, I'm going to take my competitor's price and use that as a reference point for where I'm going to set my pricing. So maybe they've been in the market for 3 years and they have more capability than we have. And so we're going to price much lower than them. Or maybe they've completely missed the mark on these really important value propositions that we can create. And we're going to come out on the market a little bit higher than them. But I would certainly use them as a reference, because it's likely that your customers, your early buyers, are going to use them and that price as a reference. So you need to understand how you can explain the difference in price.
Interesting. Because I've heard from folks out there that, and this may just be something that maybe salespeople are kind of hammering on, where it's easier to go down than up, in pricing. I don't know how true. What's your opinion on that?
Okay, so I love that saying because everybody hears it and believes it. And by the way, the reason we believe it is because once we have a price in mind, so I tell you that my product's $100, and then next week I want to sell it to you for 150. You're like, no, 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 no. You said it was 100. But next week I say I want to sell it to you for 80. You're like, okay, great, that's a great deal. I'll take it for 80. But here's the thing that requires is that you knew that I had a $100 price point. If you are Apple and you're announcing the price of the new iPhone, everybody in the world knows the price of the new iPhone. And so in their case, it's definitely easier to go down than it is to go up. But for most of us, we launch a new product and nobody knows the price of our new product unless you're shopping and explicitly buying my product. So, 0.1% of the potential market has seen my price. If I raise my price and it's new buyers, they have no idea that I raised my price. They don't know what the price used to be. And so now the question becomes, do I want to raise my prices on my current customers? And that's a very different decision than do I want to raise my prices on new customers?
Mm, interesting. It's interesting when you think about, how to determine early on, are we charging enough? I know you've talked, in the content that I've done looked up, you have phenomenal content. Um, if you think about like trying to determine, are we charging enough, are we charging too little? A lot of the time we just think about like, okay, well, unit economics and the margin that we want to be at. Of course, early stage, like that's a complete gamble, right? We have very little understanding of reality there, especially early on. But are there sort of some frameworks that you would recommend on starting to figure out, okay, we're on the right track, where it looks like we're charging enough and it's not necessarily just based on the quantitative numbers?
I would say the answer is yes. So step one, if you have no idea where to price your product, you have no competitors, it's a brand new something, I would start by using something called Van Westendorp's price sensitivity meter. Go look that up. You can Google it. Essentially, you're just going to ask people that might be able to buy your product 4 questions. And it's pretty simple to understand that. And it gets you in the ballpark that says, hey, here's about where I think we should be pricing. Great. My step two would be price it there and then do your best to understand why people did or did not buy. So if everybody, let's assume it's a direct sales force. So I've actually got a salesperson who's selling a product for a second, because this is easier to do this way. And I go pitch my product to someone and they say yes, and everybody says yes. I know that I've got a price that's too low. because I need some no's. If everybody says no, I probably have a price that's too high, but I wouldn't jump to that conclusion yet. The conclusion I would jump to first is, are we explaining the value of our product properly to the customers? Because customers always trade money for value, and they have to understand value before they're willing to give us money. So it could very well be that we just don't know how to explain it yet, and we should focus on that piece first. But in the end, there has to be some number of deals that we lose, and that would say, hey, we're in the ballpark.
Got it. Got it. So and that's interesting because I think, especially as a sales minded founder, you might be, wanting to win every deal and not, and then, it's sort of this false positive, I think, and actually that was one of my questions. Like, how do you know that you're trending in the right direction, that you're not getting, these false positives that based on maybe a model that's not going to be sustainable or good for you long term? I know that's a big question, but we could probably talk for hours on that because there's a lot of variables. But are there any things that are obvious red flags where you're like, look, there's a lot there, George, but like if these specific things are showing up, you're probably, looking at a false positive here.
Yeah, I would say win ratios is a very big deal that we're watching for. And so if we're winning every deal, that's absolutely a false positive. We have to be losing deals. And that just makes sense when you think about, most companies don't have 100% margin. So if you just assume for the brief moment that you have 50% margin, if we win every deal, then we're making 50% margin, but we could afford to lose 1 out of 10 deals at a higher price and make more profit. And so that makes all the sense in the world for us to say, okay, so how do we start working our price point up? And now you can actually do the calculations that say, at what point do we lose, more profit in terms of the number of customers that we're losing versus the number of, extra margin that we're making on each customer that we bring in. So I would be watching that pretty closely. But
Interesting.
I don't think most companies have the problem where they win every deal, right? Most
Especially
most
these days,
companies,
right?
yeah, most companies are struggling to win the deals. And so in that case, I would focus a ton on understanding how our customers really perceive the value of our products. I'd be thinking about the problems we solve, the problems they have that we solve for them, and articulating it in a way that just really resonates with them.
Yeah, and would you say that, early on, of course, small teams, the founders are heavily involved in this, but maybe as the company grows, what stakeholder, or maybe which multiple stakeholders should be owning this, and how much, of the various sort of responsibilities that you focus on, how much mind share should that organization or that team or that individual start, put on pricing? Because I don't think that it's obvious a lot of the time, and we end up backing into it later on and realizing, holy smokes, we really didn't we didn't give the mind share and the attention to this, and now we have a real problem.
Yeah. I would say the CEO, the founder of a company, almost always runs pricing, for a long time. And they don't know that they run pricing, they just do, right? There isn't a pricing person or a pricing department. And so they end up making the final decisions. And just like big companies, I think pricing is almost always an afterthought, which is sad because I think of pricing as, how do I capture the amount of money my customers are willing to pay? But I would ask a really, really hard question. Why would you build a product if you don't know how much customers were willing to pay for it? Right. And so this is really basics, right? We're at the beginning of starting a company. And should I build this or not build this? And intuitively, founders say, yeah, this is a problem. I'm going to build this. It's going to solve this problem. But they've never thought, well, how much would people pay if we solve this problem? And if we could do that, then we build better products. We build products that truly matter, that are more likely to be successful. And then the fascinating thing is we take that exact same argument and we walk it into marketing. And we say, marketing, do you truly understand what problems people are trying to solve and what value they get from our products? And if you do, then you can make marketing messages that resonate, but you don't. So what do? You talk about our products and our features and how cool we are. And then we could take that exact same story and walk that into sales and say, salespeople, do you truly understand what the problems are that we're solving and what you're looking for when you go out and prospect? And once you find a prospect, what are the problems and results they're hoping to get? Because let me tell you what they don't care about. They don't care about your features.
Hmm.
Right. And so it's this pervasive attitude throughout the whole company that has to come from understanding value. And the reason people care about value is because we want to set the right price.
And really that, you talk a lot about perceived value, and really digging into that. And that, again, it just feels like we're not really digging into that, and understanding it in the way that we should, especially early on as a startup organization. Just to back up real quick, you had mentioned, it's charging from day one, right? Like really early. How and this is something we're trying to kind of figure out right now. How early do you start to introduce pricing, especially when you're like building a prototype, and you're kind of figuring out what your angle is on the problem that you're solving. Do you think, like, even at the proof of concept, or a super early stage, there should be some sort of monetary exchange there, or or is it a little more mature? I know that's, again, like a tough question because a lot of variables there, but any sort of best practices you've seen over
Yeah.
time?
I, I think it's pretty hard to charge for a proof of concept. Right? I think most of the time you've got at least one or two beta customers that didn't pay for the product, that they're willing to put in the work to help you test it and debug it and see if it does what we say it's going to do. And so typically we don't charge those first couple customers, but I don't think of that as selling the product yet. We're still developing and creating and proving the product at that point in time. And if you think about it, those customers, they really are paying us. They're just paying us with time instead of with money.
Absolutely. Well, Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom and your knowledge. If there was one sort of thing that you would tell an early stage founder early on, one actionable tip that they can implement today, even just around thinking about the beginning to develop, their pricing model, what would that one tip be?
Man, it's so hard to only have one. Uh,
Something they can implement today, kind of thing.
Yeah, I would say that today you could go do a Van Westendorp study. It is actually pretty easy to do it. You could do it with a dozen potential buyers and get a reasonable number. And it would be really interesting to see how close you are to pricing properly.
Awesome. Mark, thank you so much. If folks wanted to follow you on social media or maybe learn more about the resources, I know you do a ton of talks and create a ton of content. Would like LinkedIn be the best channel to reach you?
Absolutely. Just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll accept most invitations to connect. So feel free to just reach out and follow me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for your time, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, George. It was great.
Thank you.